Welcome Facebook fans, BigGunner81 here. Before we begin, as always, this firearm has been safety checked, there are no cartridges inside this chamber, and there's no magazine inserted in the mag well. So, you may remember this particular pistol from the video review on the P226. It's the Sig Sauer P226 Blackwater edition. I had one of my new subscribers ask me recently after seeing that video if I could do a video on how to clean this particular firearm, so we're going to do that today. Okay, first we're going to start by field stripping this pistol, which involves removing the slide. First we're going to run it back, lock it, and then we're going to flip the takedown lever, like so. Then we're going to put our hand on here, on the slide, so it doesn't go flying. Push down on the slide release, and slide it right off. So now we have our slide and our frame separated. So first thing I'm going to do is clean up this slide real nice. So we're going to put this frame off to the side here. First I'm going to remove the guide rod and the recoil spring, like so. You kind of lift up on it, keep your hand on it so don't go flying. Slide the barrel forward and back and out of the slide just like so. So we'll start with cleaning these three components right here. The guide rod and spring is really easy to clean. Basically, what I like to use lately, and everyone's got their preference on what kind of cleaners and solvents and lubricants to use. I've been using the Hornady One Shot. It's a all-in-one clean, lube, protect type deal. So I'll just spray a little bit on the spring and take like my microfiber towel here, and I just like to wipe it off on the outside, not going too crazy with it, just to kind of get any heavy deposits off the outside of it. And like I said, everybody has their own way of doing this. This is just one way of doing it, or one way that I do it, and I'm sure that I may learn something new as I go here and try something new. So I'll spray a little cleaner on the guide rod itself. Now let's wipe it off. Here's the barrel. We're going to work on cleaning that next. So when I like to clean my barrels, I like to save a glass jar or something that I can easily put the solvent in or drip it into. So what I'll use here is, and this is just something I have on hand, is some Hoppe's Elite Cleaner. I know there's better stuff out there, I'm sure. This is just what I happen to have right now. So I'll spray a little bit down in the down the chamber there to the end of the barrel, let it kind of run through, and then set that down for just a second. Take my cleaning brush, spray a little bit on there, and just run it through, a few times. So I'm just going to do that a few more times. And then we're going to switch over to cleaning it with running some patches through the barrel to kind of wipe down the inside of that barrel. So kind of just cut one of those up there, and you can see how dirty that is. And I'm going to keep running patches through it until they come out pretty clean. That's kind of the idea. I would say that is pretty clean. I think that's a good point to go on to the next part. So there we go. So next I want to clean the outside of this barrel and also clean up this feed ramp down here. So I'm going to start with just a little bit more Hoppe's, I think, right on there, because it does seem to help break up that carbon real well. I'm going to take this brush. Yeah, it's a pink brush. Oh well. It's basically a old toothbrush from one of the kids or something, and just what I had laying around to use for this. Now I'll take my microfiber. I'm just going to kind of wipe this off right here. After we got this barrel all cleaned up on the inside and the feed ramp cleaned, what I like to do next is take a little bit of rem oil or any type of gun oil that you could use for this, for the inside the barrel. I spray it on a mop, which I do know this is not the right size mop. I need to get a new one for the 9mm. Normally I'll run this mop through once or twice. So after that's done, cleaning the inside the barrel and oiling it, I take a little bit of the one shot again, then it's an all-in-one gun cleaner and lube. I spray the outside the barrel, and then I take the nice microfiber. I just like to wipe it all off so it's nice and clean. Any of that dry lubricant will kind of work its way into the pores. So now that we have the barrel, the guide rod, and the spring clean, we'll work on cleaning up the slide next. Next we're going to work on removing this firing pin and removing the extractor as well, so we can clean inside the bore where the firing pin sits inside of, and also so we can clean the extractor and underneath the extractor real well. So in order to do that, this pin right here has to be driven out with a punch. Now this is a process that if you don't feel comfortable with, don't do it, because you can risk scratching the slide. They recommend, and they being other people who have done this before me, have recommended using a concave punch, because both of the heads on this are curved, and you need a punch that's curved inward, convex, concave, whatever. Anyway, you do need to have a punch that's curved inward to do this properly. Mine's not. Mine's flat. I'm going to be extra careful, but and hopefully I won't damage the slide. Now, this pin is supposed to be driven out from this side, so you're going to be driving it from the side of the extractor, the right side of the slide. What I like to do is two things. One, when I do this, I like to sit it on top of a roll of tape or something similar that's a stiff surface that'll hold a little bit of pressure as you're hammering on it. And two, to help avoid damage of this slide or scratching it, I like to use a little bit of painter's tape around this area, kind of like so, in order to help protect it if I do slip. I mean, it's tape, it's not gonna keep you from scratching it, but it might just help from making it a really bad scratch. Something I just like to do. So I'm gonna set that on there, and so I'm gonna set this punch right on top of it, like so. Going to tap it a little bit. So after a couple little hits of the hammer there, I got that pin driven out. One of the reasons why I like using the roll of tape is because when that pin falls, it's going to fall right in the center of that tape. Also, why I like to work on a microfiber or a towel of some sort is that any of these small parts, like especially springs or any little pins, they're not going to bounce off the table and roll away as easy. The spring might still go flying across the room, but you got to be careful when you're taking springs apart, that they don't go flying in the first place. So now that we got that out, I'm just going to set that back in the center of the roll tape there. Take off my painter's tape that I put on the side for now. Okay, so next we're going to remove the firing pin, and how we do that, and be careful, watch the orientation of this retainer right here. The half moon faces towards the rear, and the open part where you can actually see the firing pin faces towards the center of the slide there. What you're going to do is put your finger over the back of the slide here so the firing pin doesn't go flying out of the slide, and that you don't lose the spring in the firing pin or damage either one of them. So, you see it pops out, kind of just tilt it over, let it slide out as you're holding down this retainer, and you can set the firing pin off to the side there. Now I can remove this retainer, just tilt it over your hand, tap it out, you got a spring and the retainer. Set those off to the side. The firing pin, we're going to clean it in a minute, but it has a tapered spring. This side of the spring is larger than that side of the spring. So the small end goes towards the firing pin. You can pull it off and kind of show you there. I don't know if you can pick that up, how much of a difference in size it is, but there is a difference in the size there. Smaller end of the spring goes towards the firing pin. Large end towards the slide. So now we got both of those out. We're going to work on removing this extractor here so we can clean underneath it real well. And this is a full strip down, tear down of the P226 to actually clean everything and totally disassemble it and put it back together. Next, we're going to remove the extractor so we can clean underneath it. There's a pin and a spring that are pushing on this extractor. The spring's in here and the pin's in there, and it's pushing towards the front of the slide. So we have to get in there and kind of depress this, and it's very difficult to do. So I'm going to move this out of the way so I can get a little more leverage on it. Get my screwdriver between the extractor and the pin that holds the extractor. I'm pushing the spring towards the rear of the slide. It's a little bit difficult doing this to get it out. Maybe after some practice I'll get a little better at it. But we don't want to lose the spring or the pin that's inside of here, because then this firearm is not going to function. Very important piece. There we go. So you kind of have to keep your hand around this spring and this pin. Now we got the extractor out. We're going to put that off to the side. We're going to get this pin and the spring out, just like so. The spring is the same size on either side. Next, we're going to clean all these components and then reassemble. So first, with the slide, I like to use the Hornady one-shot for cleaning inside the bore where the firing pin would sit, because you don't want to put lots of oil and grease and stuff in there, because that's going to cause dirt buildup and crud to build up in there, and you don't want this firing pin sticking inside there, because if it sticks in the out position, when you go to close the slide, it's going to want to fire that round off, and that round may not be totally seated inside the chamber. That's a very dangerous situation. So you want this to be clean. You want the firing pin to be clean, you want the bore to be clean, but you don't want to have it excessively lubricated, because that crud will build up inside of it. So first, I'm going to spray a little bit of the one-shot down inside the bore there where the firing pin sits. And I like to use a Q-tip a lot of times on cleaning these things. There may be something else that's better, so if you have an idea, let me know. But I'm just kind of running that down in there, and those longer Q-tips will probably work even better, because as you can see, it's kind of in there quite a ways. So I'm just kind of wiping down the inside, and again, the Hornady one-shot is a cleaner and a lubricator and protectant, so you can see some of the crud that came out already. I'm also going to clean inside the bore where that little retainer sits as well. Just around the inside edges there, clean it up real nice. So next, we're going to work on cleaning the face here of the slide where it meets the cartridges and underneath where the extractor would sit. I'm going to use a little bit of the Hop East product on there. It seems to help break down a little bit better of the crud buildup. And I know there's better stuff out there. I might try like the CLP. I've heard good things about that. But this is just what I have on hand right now. So just taking the old pink toothbrush and cleaning out right there, kind of scrubbing it down. Nice soft bristles, not going to scratch anything. Kind of give it a light wipe down with a Q-tip. You can see some of the crud build up there coming off. After you've gotten this area cleaned up real well, and you've got both of the firing pin and the retainer bores cleaned up real well, next we want to clean out the insides of this slide here in all the areas. Now basically you can do that with either a soft bristle brush and some cleaner, or Q-tips, or however method you'd like. So I'm just going to kind of go over and do that right now. And I'm going to use some of the Hop East, on here to kind of break up some of the crud, because there's a lot of buildup inside this. I like to also kind of clean these little areas out using Q-tips down in here where it's recessed and it's kind of hard to get into. You can see how black that is. So after I went ahead and I cleaned all the little crevices in here with Q-tips and everything, even inside where the barrel rides and the guide rod, I like to go ahead and spray some of this one-shot on the inside of here too. Kind of just rinse it all down, including I'm going to rinse down the inside of this one more time where the firing pin bore is, and also the retainer bore, and spray a little bit in the side there. And you know, one other spot I want to clean real quick is inside of the where the extractor rides. Kind of clean out that area because there's a lot of crud that gets in there too. So it's pretty clean inside there. Spray it one last time. Spray it on the inside again, spray the outside, and this stuff does evaporate pretty well. It's not like an oily film or anything like that. It's one of the reasons why I like to use it. And then I like to wipe down the inside of it, inside the slide here, like so. There's still going to be some crud coming off that the Q-tips didn't quite get, you know. I like to wipe it down inside like that, down by the rails. And then I wipe down the outside. Then you're pretty much good to go there with the slide as far as cleaning it. And then now we got to clean all these little subcomponents off. We're going to want to put this pin and the spring back into the slide. It's going to go in like so. And this is not a super easy part of this project, but I'm going to start by slipping this spring back in to the bore that it sits in. The spring went right down inside the hole that it's supposed to be in. We're going to take this pin that actuates the extractor off the spring. We're going to put that in there on top of it. You can see it sits right down in there. After we put the pin in there, which I'm going to try to see if you can see, it's kind of hard to see, we're going to put this extractor back in. So as you're putting this in, you're going to kind of push it back and kind of get it to pop back in the hole that this little half moon shape sits in, and the pin rides on this little ledge. Okay, so I put a piece of painter's tape around here to kind of help keep from scratching up the slide. I mean, if you do go off to the side, you still can scratch it through the painter's tape, but it's just an extra little thin layer of protection that maybe if you just rub it lightly, you're not going to leave a scratch. So we got the extractor back into place. Took a little bit of playing around with to get it in there. Use a screwdriver against the pin to push that spring back, and kind of slid this extractor back into the slot and pushed it in towards the slide to get it kind of seated in there, and then seated the pin up against its little divot that it has on the extractor. So next we're going to go ahead and work on cleaning up these components here. Now we're ready to reassemble the slide. So the spring for the firing pin retainer, and again, that may be the wrong technical word for this piece right here. There's so many different names sometimes for these things that, you know, you can get confused on what to call it. But anyhow, you guys do see what piece I'm referring to, I'm sure, and can figure that out. So go ahead and I'll set the spring inside there, you know, inside its little recess, its little bore. I'm going to set this down into the slide. Then I'm going to orientate it so it's facing the way it's supposed to, where, as you can see, the half moon right here is facing towards the rear. So I kind of set it down in the bore there. Alright. Then we're going to take the firing pin. Remember, the small end goes towards the pin itself. It kind of actually hooks on this little groove that's down there, which may be very hard to see on the camera. But slip that on over there and get it to kind of pop onto its little groove. And it's kind of nice that it's made that way, because you're not going to necessarily lose the spring, hopefully, because it clips right onto the end there. So we're going to take the pin and reinsert it into the slide. There are these notches for the pin that we had to drive out earlier, and also for this retainer that kind of ride in there. Those are going to be facing up, you know, up towards your sights, basically. So you're going to just drop that down inside there. You're going to push the firing pin retainer down into the bore, kind of like so. You kind of push it down in there and kind of wiggle the firing pin a little bit. In fact, I'm just going to take the pin to kind of push against it. And just kind of wiggle it in there. And then what I like to do is just take a Q-tip or something, push that firing pin in, and you can see it's not popping out. I want to make sure it's moving freely, so it's kind of, I'll take that up closer to the camera. just kind of, push against it, make sure that pin's moving in and out, and so on. So now we got to put that pin back in, this one that we had so much fun driving out earlier. It's going to go in from the left side, and it's going to get driven out to the right side. Before we begin, I'm just kind of looking down in that hole to see where everything is at, and I see the firing pin, the little notch on it, sticks out a little bit. So what we're going to have to do is, you see it only dropped in that far. I'm going to push this firing pin in, because this is actually the firing pin, retaining pin, I guess is maybe the word for it. You see how it kind of dropped down in there a little more? I'll kind of show you again. I'll pull it back up. You may have seen the firing pin pop out. There's a notch on that firing pin, as we saw earlier, and the notch is kind of covering part way in the hole in the center of the slide. So push it in, see how the pin dropped back in. Now the firing pin is in place, and we need to drive this pin back in and have it seated. So I'm going to pause for a second, and we're going to put a little bit of tape around the outside of the slide there so we protect it, and we'll drive that pin in. Okay, so I put some tape around this pin, and let me just say this, I'm using painter's tape on this. I wouldn't recommend using duct tape or packaging tape or anything like that. Painter's tape's designed to be peeled off in a relatively short amount of time without leaving any real residue behind. So that's why I'm using painter's tape. It's just something to kind of help with light scratches. It's not going to help if you really hammer a, your punch right into the frame or something. So, but it will help if you kind of drop a tool around it or just barely touch the surface. It'll help keep you from, destroying that finish and everything. So I'm just going to start this pin in by tapping it like so, lightly. So we got the firing pin, retaining pin reinstalled with minimal effort there. Just put some painter's tape on there. It definitely helps save from getting scratches on the side of the slide there. So next we're going to reassemble the barrel and the guide rod back into the slide assembly. So we'll take our barrel and it just kind of slips inside. Like so. And the guide rod and guide rod spring. Well, one thing to note, the smaller end of the guide rod spring goes onto the guide rod first. It's hard to tell which side is smaller, but they do actually put the paint on the spring so you can tell which end goes towards the inside of the slide. If you notice, if you slip the orange end of this spring on there, the firing or the guide rod doesn't slip out, but if you slip it onto this side, it falls right out. So it's definitely larger, but it's very hard to tell because it's a slight difference. So painted side goes towards the inside of the slide. We're going to reinsert the spring and the guide rod on it and get it to seat right up against the ledge of the barrel, kind of like so. So we've completed our reassembly on the slide assembly for the P226. Some models may vary in design, so there may be some differences, but this is just how my particular P226 comes apart. And so take all this information and use it at your own risk.